She thought she was helping family. But when strange cars started showing up at 2 a.m., her water bill tripled, and her stepdaughter dodged every question. A 65-year-old woman in Phoenix realized something was very, very wrong. So she pretended to go on vacation. And what she caught on a drone camera turned her backyard paradise into a crime scene. But the darkest part wasn't the drugs, the parties, or the police raid. It was what her own family planned to do to her. This is the true story of the backyard pool house. Welcome back to the channel, where we explore real stories of hidden dangers, unseen betrayals, and ordinary people who discover extraordinary truths. Today we follow Helen, a 65-year-old divorcee whose simple act of kindness spiraled into a web of deception in her very own backyard. What started as a temporary favor became a months-long mystery of secret parties, financial schemes, and a shocking family betrayal. Settle in. This is a story you won't forget. The desert sun had a way of settling into everything in Phoenix. The concrete, the windowsills, the bones of a woman who had lived here long enough to understand that heat could be both a comfort and a warning. At 65, Helen Marston had come to appreciate the delicate balance between the two. Heat kept you vigilant. Heat kept you aware. Heat reminded you that the world didn't stop for your heartbreaks. 3 years had passed since her marriage to Douglas ended, though the term ended felt too clean, too finished, too polite for what it really was. Divorce, in its quieter, more vicious form, haunted you long after signatures dried. It wasn't the kind of mourning others felt sorry for. No funeral, no flowers, no casseroles. Just a box of paperwork and a house that suddenly felt too large, too empty. Still, Helen had rebuilt. Slowly, quietly, and on her own terms. Her home, a pale stucco single-story with a shimmering turquoise pool, had once been her sanctuary. She swam every morning, fed hummingbirds every afternoon, sat in the shaded patio evenings with a glass of wine and the kind of silence that didn't punish but healed. At least until her stepdaughter, Jenna, showed up. Helen had always liked Jenna, or at least tried to. She was the only child Douglas had brought into Helen's life, arriving with a blend of charm and chaos characteristic of people used to being the center of someone's world. Jenna's mother had passed when she was young, and somewhere along the way, Douglas had turned indulgence into love. It left Jenna unprepared for adulthood, financially, emotionally, and in every way that mattered. So when Jenna and her husband, Kyle, knocked on Helen's door one evening in late August, her eyes red, his jaw clenched, Helen didn't hesitate. "We got evicted," Jenna said, voice small. Helen blinked. "Evicted? From the townhouse?" Kyle exhaled sharply. "We fell behind. Job market's crap. You know how it is." Her instinctive response, "No, I don't know how it is because I pay my bills on time and don't snort away half my savings," remained politely locked behind her teeth. Instead, she opened her home. "The pool house is available," she said softly. "Just until you get back on your feet." Jenna's relief was instant, almost theatrical. She hugged Helen with the kind of desperation that felt both sincere and manipulative. Kyle managed a stiff nod, gratitude flickering behind his eyes. Helen chalked it up to stress. People behaved strangely under strain. What she did not anticipate was how swiftly the word temporarily would evaporate. The pool house was originally built as a guest suite. 1 bedroom, kitchenette, bathroom, and a sliding glass door facing the pool. It had good bones and plenty of privacy. Perfect little haven. Within the first week, Helen noticed small changes. Her water bill, normally predictable, spiked by 40%. 40%. She tried to laugh it off. "Maybe Kyle's showering twice a day," she told her friend Marjorie on the phone. "Or running a car wash out of your backyard," Marjorie replied dryly. Then there were the cars. Unfamiliar sedans. A pickup with tinted windows. An orange motorcycle that looked like it belonged to someone with more tattoos than common sense. They came at odd hours, noon, midnight, 3 a.m., and left just as quickly. When Helen asked Jenna casually, over a shared cup of iced tea one afternoon, Jenna waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, those? Just friends visiting. Helping us move some boxes. Or dropping things off." "Dropping what off?" "Stuff." Jenna smiled too widely, the kind of smile that belonged on a stage, not a patio. Helen's suspicions settled in like the Phoenix dust storms, slowly at first, Then all at once, Helen tried to ignore it at least for a while. She had learned during her marriage that some battles weren't worth picking. Douglas had always defended Jenna until his last breath in their shared home, turning small misunderstandings into full-blown arguments. Helen saw no reason to resurrect old patterns. Besides, she had other things to think about. Her upcoming birthday, a book club gathering, the hummingbirds that kept returning this season in record numbers. And yet the unease grew. One night, after waking up at 1:42 a.m. to flashing lights in the pool's reflection, she peeked through the blinds. The pool house door was open, music thumping faintly. Figures moved inside, silhouettes bobbing, passing things back and forth. Helen frowned. Just friends, she reminded herself. Just friends didn't show up at 2 in the morning. Just friends didn't keep headlights off while parking. Just friends didn't leave behind the faint scent of skunked weed drifting across the water. Her pool, her sanctuary, had become a stage for something she couldn't yet name. The turning point came in early September. Helen stepped out to water her potted herbs when she caught a glimpse of Jenna whispering urgently to a man in the driveway. Tall, hoodie pulled low, hands jammed in pockets. When he handed her an envelope, Jenna tucked it under her shirt with practiced ease. Helen froze. Jenna looked up, startled. Oh, hey Helen. Who was that? Just a buddy returning money he owed Kyle. The lie came too fast. Helen nodded slowly. I see. You okay? Jenna laughed nervously. Helen's voice was calm. Too calm. Perfectly fine. Inside her chest, a stone settled. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Helen had always been resourceful. A woman who'd lived long enough to gather a toolkit of survival instincts. She knew how to fix a leaking faucet, how to negotiate with roofers, how to cook a perfect pot roast, how to stretch $1, how to sense when someone was exploiting her kindness. And she knew how to investigate. The plan formed over the course of 3 sleepless nights. If Jenna asked where she was going, Helen wanted a story that was both believable and luxurious enough that Jenna wouldn't dare question it. She created a dummy itinerary. A 3-day spa retreat in Sedona. Detox, meditation, facial peels. She printed out the brochure. Circled activities. Even packed a suitcase. Jenna swallowed the lie easily. Oh, that's great, Helen. You deserve it, she said, hugging her. Helen forced a smile. Call if you need anything. She loaded her suitcase into her car, half filled with newspapers for weight, and drove away. But instead of heading north toward Sedona, she circled through the neighborhood, doubled back, and parked in front of a small Airbnb 2 blocks away. A casita recommended by Marjorie. As she closed the door behind her, she felt her pulse steady. Then she pulled out the borrowed drone. Her neighbor, Frank, was an avid birdwatcher who used the drone's high-resolution camera to track nesting falcons. When Helen asked if she could borrow it for real estate photos, he didn't hesitate. Now, as she powered it on, the low hum filled the small living room. Let's see what you two are really up to, she whispered. The drone rose into the Arizona sky. Helen watched the live feed on her phone. What she saw changed everything. The pool house lights were on. People, strangers, filtered in and out through the sliding door. Cases of beer. Coolers. Neon glow sticks. Portable speakers. Tables. The pool deck transformed into a makeshift nightclub. A banner hung inside. Private event tonight. The kind used for underground parties, advertised by word of mouth. Helen zoomed in. Her mouth went dry. A small table set up inside held neatly organized rows of pills. Plastic baggies. Cash. A card reader. Jenna wasn't just hosting parties. She was running an operation. Kyle manned the money. Jenna greeted guests. Someone else DJ'd. The drone microphone picked up snippets. 20 for entry. VIP gets you 2 shots and a tab bracelet. Keep the door closed, neighbors, man. Neighbors. Helen felt her breath catch. I am the neighbor, she thought bitterly. For the first time since her divorce, anger flared inside her with a heat that rivaled the Phoenix sun. Her pool house wasn't a sanctuary. It was a crime scene. And she intended to do something about it. The following morning, she drove quietly back to her house while the neighborhood slept. She entered through the side gate, staying low. The pool house was silent. The party clearly ended hours earlier. Inside her main house, she plugged her phone into her laptop and transferred the entire drone feed. She had evidence now, but she wanted more. Helen's next step involved Jenna's carelessness with her phone. Jenna often left it charging in the kitchen. Helen noted the passcode months ago. A simple 4-digit combination Jenna used for everything. When the opportunity arose, Helen took it. A quick scroll. A few screenshots. What she found was worse than she ever imagined. Not only were Jenna and Kyle using the pool house as a venue, they were planning something far darker. Messages between Jenna and someone labeled R. We contest her will and push the narrative she's losing it. PI says he can stage pics. Maybe catch her yelling at people in public, talking to herself, or messing up her meds. My dad left me nothing. She owes me. Once we get the early inheritance, it's all ours. House included. Helen felt her entire body go cold. They were staging her downfall. Trying to have her declared emotionally unstable. Planning to steal her home. Her future. Her life. And the resentment. She owes me. My dad left me nothing. She sank into a dining chair. Phone trembling in her hand. For a moment she closed her eyes. Not out of weakness, but out of a need to summon something inside her that had gone dormant. The fierce, unyielding part of herself that divorce tried to kill but hadn't succeeded. When she opened them, her decision was clear. She would not be a victim. Not to grief. Not to loneliness. And certainly not to a stepdaughter with a vendetta. The next chapter of her life had begun. And it would end on her terms. Helen had always believed there were two kinds of danger in the world. The kind that came at you with noise, chaos, and warnings, and the kind that slithered silently through cracks, disguising itself as something ordinary. What she had uncovered in her stepdaughter's phone proved the latter kind was far more vicious. For hours after reading those messages, Helen didn't move. She sat at her dining table, watching the morning sunlight creep slowly across the tile floor as though measuring time in thin golden inches. Her fingers still trembled from holding Jenna's phone. Her chest felt tight. Not panicked but focused. The kind of tightness she imagined soldiers felt in the seconds before stepping onto a battlefield. They wanted her home. They wanted her declared unstable. They wanted her inheritance. No, they wanted control. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't grief. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was a plot. And she intended to expose it piece by piece. Helen began by reorganizing her thoughts the way she used to reorganize lesson plans when she taught middle school English decades ago. With lists, color-coded sticky notes, and quiet determination. She wrote down each piece of evidence she had. Drone footage, screenshots, suspicious financial behavior, unusual visitors, and the chilling text thread about contesting her will. As she looked down at the spread of papers on her table, a part of her felt almost embarrassed about how deeply she had trusted Jenna. She had wanted to believe that opening her home was an act of compassion. But compassion, she reminded herself, didn't need to be blind. Her next step was obvious. She needed to know who R was. The mysterious contact in Jenna's phone. Someone close enough to discuss legal strategies and fabricate evidence. But before she could investigate further, she needed to be sure that Jenna suspected nothing. That afternoon Helen made noise literally. She clanged kitchen drawers, ran the vacuum, and turned on a cooking show loudly enough to be heard from the hallway. She wanted Jenna to know she was home, normal, predictable, unaware. When Jenna came into the kitchen around 4 p.m., sunglasses still on inside the house, Helen noted how exhausted she looked. Late-night partying didn't mix well with early afternoons. "Hey," Jenna said, grabbing a bottle of orange Gatorade from the fridge. "You're up late," Helen replied, stirring her iced tea. "Didn't sleep much." Jenna yawned. "Events, you know? People get rowdy." "Events." Helen bit the inside of her cheek. "Have you two found any new apartments to apply for?" Jenna stiffened. "Working on it. The pool house is meant for temporary stays." "I know." Jenna's voice grew sharp. "It's just hard right now." Helen nodded, letting silence settle between them. "Anyway," Jenna said, forcing a smile, "how was Sedona?" "Relaxing." "Good. You needed that." If guilt were a tangible thing, Helen wondered, would Jenna even recognize it? Something told her no. As night fell and Jenna returned to the pool house, Helen sat at her laptop and began digging. First, she searched phone records. The number 4R wasn't in her personal contacts, but logs showed frequent calls in the past month. Next, she scrolled through Kyle's public social media. Mostly photos of cars, beer, and cringeworthy motivational quotes. Then she found a comment. Under a photo of a bonfire party, someone named Rogan had commented, "Next time host it legit, bro. I can bring clients." Helen clicked. Rogan's profile was locked, but his public bio said enough. Private investigator, Maricopa County. Her breath hitched. Working with Jenna. To declare her incompetent. Her pulse quickened but her hands remained steady. She clicked the website listed under his business name. Rogan Tactical Surveillance and Recovery. The site was cheap-looking. A dark background, pixelated logo, boasting services like evidence acquisition, marital investigation, and disturbingly, mental state documentation. Her jaw clenched. This was the man they planned to hire to destroy her reputation. But why? What was the goal? The next morning, the house carried a strange and heavy stillness. A stillness that reminded Helen of the moments right before one of Phoenix's brutal summer monsoons. When the air thickened. When the wind paused. When every creature seemed to hold its breath. And just like a monsoon, she knew what was coming wouldn't be gentle. Friday was tomorrow. The rave. The moment everything would erupt. She needed to spend today gathering the final pieces of evidence while keeping her stepdaughter unaware she was back in the city. She spent the early morning sitting on her patio, watching the pool ripple softly in the gentle breeze. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe. Not because she felt safe, but because she needed clarity. Across the yard, the pool house curtains were drawn tight. No shadows moved behind them. No sounds escaped the walls. A deceptive quiet, masking the chaos brewing inside. Helen checked her phone. Tyler had sent a midnight message. "Tyler, I added a tracker to their online marketplace listings. They're advertising tonight's VIP pre-party. Drugs, alcohol, entry fee at the door. Evidence is piling up fast." She typed a careful thank you, then placed her phone in her pocket. Now it was time for the final reconnaissance. Helen moved quietly to the side gate and slipped out toward the alley behind her home. From there, she launched the small drone skyward, its 4 propellers whispering into the warm morning air. She directed it over the property, letting it hover above the pool house. The thermal camera picked up movement. A lot of movement. She toggled the audio. Voices poured into her headphones. "We need more folding chairs. Rogan said security has to be tight. Tell your sister we need her speaker set. The cash drop happens at midnight." Helen clenched her jaw. They weren't just running a party. They were running a full-on illegal nightclub. She panned the drone slightly. Kyle stood outside smoking, scrolling through his phone. 2 masked strangers carried boxes into the pool house. Boxes marked with faded labels. Energy drinks, cleaning supplies, pool equipment. But she'd seen enough packaging in her life to know misdirection. Those were drugs. And large quantities. Helen's stomach churned, but her hands remained steady on the drone controls. She brought the drone closer, zoomed in, and captured every detail. Then she sent the footage to Tyler and backed it up to the encrypted cloud. Around noon, Helen noticed something odd. The back patio near the pool house had fresh footprints in the dust, several pairs. And tire marks that didn't belong to any vehicle she recognized. She moved closer. Fresh prints. Fresh tracks. And right on the steps, as though dropped in haste, lay a small black object. She picked it up. A lapel microphone. Cheap. Portable. Used for covert recordings. Her heartbeat quickened, but not from fear. This was confirmation. Rogan was preparing to document evidence of her supposed erratic behavior. But she was one step ahead. She carefully removed the battery, pocketed the device, and erased its presence from the dust marks by casually sweeping the ground with her sandal. Let them wonder. Confusion was a powerful weapon. By late afternoon, Tyler arrived at her home, carrying a small backpack and a nervous expression. "Helen, you need to see this." He set his laptop on her dining table and opened a series of screenshots. It was a group chat. A group chat between Jenna, Kyle, and Rogan. Tyler explained. One of their associates posted a public image of the drug boxes with your pool house visible in the background. I traced it through metadata. Helen leaned closer. The chat messages appeared. Rogan. We go forward with the instability plan. That note she left in the fridge is perfect. Jenna told you she's losing it. I can testify she's been confused for months. Kyle. Once she's removed from the house, we start renovation. Jenna. Dad always told me the house would be mine one day. She's just living in it temporarily. Rogan. And with the recordings I'll get tonight, the judge will eat it up. Tyler exhaled sharply. They're accelerating everything. They plan to escalate the legal push right after tomorrow night's rave. Helen placed a gentle, steady hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Tyler. You've done more than I could have asked. He hesitated. Are you sure you don't want to go to the police right now? Not yet. If we go too early, they'll claim misunderstanding, maybe even flip it on me. But if we wait until the rave, she met his eyes. They'll have no escape. He nodded reluctantly. Then we finish this tomorrow. We do, Helen said softly. As night folded over Phoenix, Helen sat alone on her patio, listening to the distant hum of desert life, cicadas, the faint roar of traffic, an owl calling from a rooftop somewhere nearby. Her pool glowed from underwater lights, casting soft ripples of blue across the yard. A peaceful scene. A safe scene. A reminder of the sanctuary she had tried to build. Inside the pool house, that sanctuary was being twisted, exploited, corrupted. But not for long. Helen took a deep breath, letting the warm desert air fill her lungs. This was her home. Her life. Her peace. And tomorrow she would take it all back. She whispered into the warm darkness. Let them come. Around 11 p.m. the pool house door opened. Helen watched from her darkened kitchen window. Jenna stepped outside, clearly stressed. She paced while speaking on her phone. She's still not home. Yes, the note is in the fridge. Kyle thinks she's slipping already. She paused, listening. Then, Rogan, relax. The judge will believe you. And after tomorrow, we'll have more than enough proof. Proof. They thought they were gathering proof. Helen felt something powerful rise inside her. Not rage, not fear, but a righteous, burning resolve. Tomorrow, all their proof would become evidence. Against them. Before going to bed, Helen pulled out one last tool Tyler had given her. A tiny motion-activated camera disguised as a plant sprinkler head. She placed it near the walkway leading to the pool house. It would capture every face, every arrival, every criminal act. Tomorrow night would be the last time they ever used her home. And the footage would seal their fate. She turned toward the pool house one last time. Lights still on. Shadows shifting. Voices rising. Her stepdaughter planning, scheming, celebrating too early. Helen whispered to herself. Tomorrow, you learn who you're dealing with. Then she returned inside, locked the door, set her alarms, and allowed herself to sleep, deeply, peacefully. For tomorrow the storm would come. And Helen would be ready. Helen awoke before dawn on the day of the rave. Though awoke suggested she had slept. She had spent most of the night listening to the tinnitus-like buzz of anticipation. Her thoughts flickering through memories, evidence, scenarios, and outcomes. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint whir of the ceiling fan. Phoenix mornings were always cool before sunrise, a brief reprieve before the desert reclaimed the day. She brewed coffee, strong, dark, the way her father used to drink it before heading out to his workshop. The smell grounded her, reminding her of simpler things. Wood shavings, leather gloves, and the gentle rasp of sandpaper smoothing rough edges. It reminded her that rough edges could be smoothed, if one had patience and the right tools. Today, though, she wasn't smoothing anything. Today was for cutting. Helen moved with calm deliberateness, checking the files saved on her laptop, the flash drive tucked into her purse, and the notes she had written the night before. The pile of evidence was now meticulous, a teacher's version of a criminal dossier, organized with the precision Jenna had always lacked. And yet, as she walked to the kitchen window and parted the blinds, Helen felt something unexpected. Not fear, not even anger, but grief. The pool house stood quietly in the yard, its curtains drawn. She remembered when Douglas had helped her pick out the paint for it, laughing as he struggled to carry 2 gallons at once. She remembered holidays when Jenna visited as a teenager, sulking by the pool with headphones on, refusing sunscreen because tan lines were ugly. She remembered thinking she could be a second mother to her. Wrong, apparently. Helen exhaled. One more day, she whispered. By tonight everything would change. The afternoon sun baked the yard, and Helen spent the day preparing her home. Not for guests, not for family, but for the aftermath of a storm. First, she double-checked the locks. Then she moved breakables into cabinets, as though anticipating chaos. Finally, she placed the flash drive containing all her evidence into the back pocket of her purse, zipped it, and set it aside. By late afternoon, strange cars were already appearing. Not in her driveway, but slowly circling the block, scouting. A black SUV with a custom paint job. A beat-up minivan with neon decals. 2 motorcycles. Helen watched from behind the curtain, the way an old fox might watch a pack of restless dogs. "Getting bold," she murmured. As dusk approached, she stepped outside to water her plants. A ritual she hoped would make her invisible. But someone noticed anyway. A young woman, maybe 22, with pastel hair and platform boots, approached Helen at the curb. "Hey," the girl said, chewing gum loudly. "Is this the house with the party?" Helen looked her straight in the eye. "Not tonight." The girl shrugged, climbed into her friend's car and drove off. But Helen felt her pulse tick up. Word had spread wider than she thought. Tonight would be large. Dangerously large. By 8 p.m. the transformation was complete. From her darkened living room, Helen watched guests file through the side gate. Past drinks, glow sticks, and small baggies as casually as handing out mints. The thump of bass vibrated through the glass panes. Lights in magentas, blues, and greens flashed from the pool deck, illuminating dancers like ghosts in neon. The drone feed showed even more. At least 50 people crowded the pool house. Kyle stood by the sliding door taking cash. Jenna floated through the crowd, high ponytail bouncing, laughing as though she were some sort of celebrity hostess instead of a criminal in Helen's backyard. Then she saw him. Rogan, the PI. The man Jenna intended to hire to destroy her. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, scanning the crowd with a predator's calm. He looked nothing like the corporate investigators Helen had seen on TV. He wore a leather jacket despite the heat. His expression was cool, calculating, rehearsing lies in his head. Helen's lips thinned. "You won't get the chance." She checked her watch. 9:14 p.m. Right on time. She stepped into her office, picked up the landline, and dialed the number Tyler had found for the Phoenix PD Vice Squad. A woman answered. "Phoenix PD Vice Bureau. What's your report?" Helen kept her voice calm, steady. "My name is Helen Marston. I have video evidence of an unlicensed underground drug, an alcohol event, occurring right now at my residence. There are minors present, narcotics on tables, and armed security at the door. I'm the homeowner. And I'm in danger." The operator instantly shifted tone. "Are you in a safe location?" "Yes. Inside the main house. They are in the separate pool house behind my home. I am locked inside. I have video, audio, and text message evidence. I can send it immediately. Stay where you are. Officers are en route. Do not engage with anyone." Helen hung up. For the first time all night, her hands shook. Not from fear. From release. This was happening. And there was no turning back. 10 minutes later, the drone feed captured them. Police lights flashing silently at first. A tactical team emerging from the shadows. 6 officers scaling the side gate. 2 more approaching the front. And 1 officer speaking into a radio, nodding at the intel Helen had sent. Her doorbell rang. Helen hurried to open it. A short, muscular officer stood there. "Ms. Marston? Vice Bureau. Are you safe?" "Yes. Stay inside. We'll extract you when the area is secure." Helen nodded. From her window, she watched it unfold. The moment the officers entered the backyard, panic erupted. The music cut abruptly. Guests screamed, ran, tripped over lounge chairs. Someone dove into the pool fully clothed, as though water could erase guilt. Rogan shoved a table aside, reaching instinctively for something under his jacket. But 2 officers tackled him before he could draw. Kyle tried to bolt through the side gate. He got as far as 3 steps. Jenna stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the scene as though watching her life crumble in real time. Helen watched calmly, her eyes fixed on Jenna. Not with hatred, not with satisfaction, but with a strange, crushing sadness. This girl, this lost, angry, unraveling girl, had been 15 when she first cried on Helen's shoulder about her geometry grade. Now she was being handcuffed. As an officer pushed Jenna toward the house, the two women locked eyes through the window. Jenna's expression twisted. Shock, anger, betrayal, and something deeper. Fear. Helen closed the curtain. She didn't need to see more. A knock came 10 minutes later. Miss Marston? We need a statement. Helen stepped outside. Officers guided her through the yard, now littered with glow sticks, overturned coolers, and dazed partygoers sitting on the grass with hands on their heads. Kyle glared at her. Rogan spat on the ground when she walked past. Jenna. Jenna stared at the pool water, shoulders sagging. Helen, she whispered as Helen walked by. You did this? To your family. Helen stopped, turned, met Jenna's eyes, and said softly, You stopped being my family the moment you tried to destroy my life. Jenna recoiled as though struck. And for the first time since this began, Helen saw the truth in her stepdaughter's eyes. Not malice, not calculation, but a deep, festering wound. Dad chose you, Jenna whispered. He always chose you. Ah, there it was. Not greed. Not inheritance. Not the house. Resentment. Raw and old. You think I took him from you, Helen said, voice softer now. Tears finally broke in Jenna's eyes. He stopped caring about me when you married him. Helen felt something crack inside her. Not sympathy. Not forgiveness. But understanding. Jenna, that isn't true, she said quietly. But even if it were, nothing excuses what you did. Jenna looked down, shaking. Officers led her away. Helen inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with warm desert air. The nightmare was over. 2 days later, the pool house stood empty. Police tape fluttered softly in the breeze. The DJ equipment was gone. The smell of smoke cleared. The neon paint had been hosed off the pavers. All that remained was the silence Helen once cherished. And a future waiting to be rewritten. She spent the next week cleaning, repainting, repairing, and reclaiming the space. And when it was done, the pool house looked nothing like the crime scene it had been. It was serene, airy, peaceful. A yoga studio. Her yoga studio. Helen stood in the center of the room, sunlight stretching across the new bamboo floors, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The kind that didn't whisper. The kind that didn't tremble. The kind that rooted itself firmly. She unrolled her mat, sat cross-legged, and breathed deeply. When she opened her eyes, she whispered into the quiet. My life. My home. My terms. And for the first time it felt true. Helen later recorded a message for her new YouTube channel. Something she'd never imagined doing. A video titled, Recognizing Elder Financial Abuse. My story. Her voice was steady. Her message was clear. Her audience, thousands of viewers, listened. And for the first time in a long time, Helen understood that her story wasn't one of survival. It was one of reclaiming, rebuilding, and never, ever underestimating a woman who had lived enough life to know her own strength. The sirens began as a faint ripple in the desert silence, an almost delicate wail carried on the wind, so soft Helen mistook it for coyotes at first. But seconds later, the sound multiplied, strengthened, and surged into a full-throated chorus of law enforcement approaching from every direction. Her breath caught. This was it. From her vantage point at the far edge of the yard, hidden behind her Palo Verde tree, Helen watched as the quiet Phoenix night erupted into organized chaos. Blue and red lights flickered against the adobe walls of her home. The pounding bass from the pool house rumbled like a heartbeat that didn't yet realize it was about to flatline. The Vice Squad swept in with tactical precision. 3 unmarked SUVs skidded to a stop near the driveway. A police van pulled up behind them, blocking escape. Officers fanned out, some toward the side gate, others climbing over the fence with practiced ease. A pair approached the backyard door in a low crouch, hands steady on drawn weapons. Helen's pulse hammered. She had imagined this moment dozens of times, but imagining and witnessing were entirely different creatures. Seeing it, the lights, the officers, the sudden stillness before a strike, felt like being inside a movie she never auditioned for. Police. Phoenix PD. Open the door. The music blasted on inside the pool house. No one heard, or rather no one cared to. A second officer banged harder. Open the door. Search warrant. Still nothing. They exchanged a quick nod. The battering ram swung. With a deafening crack, the pool house door splintered inward. Screams erupted from inside, high-pitched, panicked, raw. The music screeched to a halt as bodies scrambled in every direction. Flashlights pierced the dim interior. Hands where we can see them. Don't move. Stay on the ground. Helen clutched the rough bark of the tree trunk for balance, unable to look away. It felt wrong to watch, yet impossible not to. This was her home. Her life. Her betrayal made manifest. The partygoers poured out in a chaotic wave. Teens, 20-somethings, and bleary-eyed strangers staggered through the crushed desert landscaping. Some attempted to run, but found their escape blocked by officers. A couple tried scaling the back fence, only to meet law enforcement on the other side. It was surreal. Her pool house, once a space of quiet mornings, gentle sunlight, and occasional holiday guests, was now a war zone for illegal substances, underage drinking, and enough narcotics to start a small franchise. Then she saw Jenna. Her stepdaughter stumbled out of the pool house, mascara streaked across her cheeks, hair tangled, eyes puffy and wild. Kyle followed behind, hands raised, shouting something incoherent about permits, misunderstandings, and, "You can't do this." Two officers cuffed him mid-sentence. Jenna screamed, "Wait, wait, this isn't what it looks like." But another officer cut her off sharply. "Ma'am, step to the side. Hands behind your back." Tears streamed down her face. No, you don't understand. I live here. My mom said we could be here." Helen bristled at the word mom. She had never been Jenna's mother. Not according to Jenna herself. As Jenna was cuffed, her gaze finally swept the yard. She froze. Their eyes met. Shock, anger, realization, and then betrayal. Not her betrayal. Jenna's. "You," Jenna hissed from across the lawn, voice cracking. "You called them." Helen didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was painted across the night in flashing lights and frantic shouting. Kyle twisted toward her. "You're insane. You set us up." Helen's spine straightened. "No, Kyle. I stopped you." A nearby officer quickly stepped between them, directing both toward separate transport vehicles. The desert air vibrated with tension as more evidence bags were carried out. A stash of pills, rolled bills, a cash lockbox, 2 burners' phones, and what looked disturbingly like a guest sign-in sheet for underground parties. The officer leading the raid approached Helen. "Ma'am," he asked gently, "you're the homeowner?" "Yes," she whispered. "You did the right thing." She swallowed hard. "I hope so. Given what we found, there's no question." He paused. "We'll need a full statement from you. But not tonight. Get some rest, okay?" Rest. The word felt foreign. As if she would sleep tonight. But she nodded. When the officer walked off, Helen finally exhaled. Long, shakily, as if the air had been trapped in her lungs for years. The rave was over. But the confrontation was just beginning. Jenna was seated in the back of the police van when she shouted through the open window. "Helen! Helen, please!" Her voice had turned desperate, no longer furious, no longer defensive, just terrified. "Please!" Jenna sobbed. "Don't let them take me. I didn't know Kyle was doing all this. I swear I didn't know about the drugs. I didn't know about the money." Helen stepped closer. Officers stood nearby but didn't intervene. Jenna's face was blotchy, streaked with tears. The bright, smug confidence she'd worn for weeks had collapsed, leaving the frightened girl underneath, the one Helen had once tried so hard to reach. "Please," Jenna whispered hoarsely. "Don't let them arrest me. I'll fix everything. I'll move out. I'll stop the parties. Just don't do this." Helen felt something twist inside her. Pity? Anger? Both. "You tried to have me declared unstable," Helen said quietly. Jenna's breath hitched. No, I saw your texts." Jenna's face drained of color. "I know about Rogan. I know about the PI. I know you wanted the inheritance early." Jenna's voice collapsed into a strangled whisper. I thought you never wanted me. You left my dad. You ruined everything." Helen's throat tightened. "Your father and I divorced because he cheated. Because he lied. I didn't ruin your family, Jenna. Your father did." Tears streamed down Jenna's cheeks again. But Helen continued steady as stone. And you brought strangers into my home. You sold drugs on my property. You risked my freedom, my finances, my safety. I'm sorry, Jenna sobbed. I'm so sorry. Helen stared at her for a long moment. Then she said softly, you made your choices. Now you face the consequences. The officer shut the van door. Jenna's cry, raw, wounded, shattered, echoed through the yard. And as the vehicles pulled away one by one, their sirens fading into the warm Arizona night, Helen stood alone in her backyard. Everything was still. The desert was quiet. The pool water reflected nothing but stars. A chapter of her life had slammed shut. But another, stronger, clearer, hers was about to begin. The morning after the raid rose quietly, too quietly, as if the desert itself were trying to apologize for the chaos it had hosted the night before. Soft amber light filtered through Helen's kitchen windows, washing the tile in a muted glow that felt both foreign and comforting. The silence was heavy but clean. Not the tense, anticipatory hush she'd endured for weeks. It was the silence of a storm finally past. Helen stood at the counter, coffee mug in hand, staring out across her backyard. The pool house sat still and vacant, its door covered temporarily by a plywood board the officers had installed after the raid. The pool water glittered peacefully, disturbed only by the occasional ripple of a morning breeze. Her kingdom, her sanctuary, was finally hers again. But peace didn't slip into her chest as easily as she expected. Not yet. There was still the aftershock, the emotional debris that comes when betrayal collides with justice. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Carlson, the lead investigator. We'll need you for a statement tomorrow at 10 a.m. Not urgent. Rest today. You did the right thing. The right thing. Helen let out a slow breath. She wished doing the right thing didn't hurt so much. She sat down at her dining table, not with dread this time but with purpose. She opened her planner, flipped to an empty page, and wrote the word that had been building in her chest since last night. Reclaim. One word. One mission. Her life had been hijacked, her safety compromised, her trust shattered. But she wasn't going to let that be the end of the story. She refused to spend her remaining years afraid or apologetic for standing up for herself. She would reclaim her home, her peace, her purpose, and maybe, somewhere along the way, reclaim the version of herself she'd lost over years of compromise and disappointment. She tapped the pen thoughtfully. Step 1, secure the house. Step 2, consult her attorney. Step 3, decide what to do about the pool house. Her gaze drifted outside again. For years, the pool house had been just an extra building, rarely used, quiet, harmless. And yet, under Jenna and Kyle's carelessness, it had transformed into something toxic. A place of danger. A symbol of how little control she had allowed herself to hold. But it didn't have to stay that way. Helen took a sip of coffee. A new idea began forming. A space of chaos could become a space of healing. Yes. Maybe that's exactly what she needed. That afternoon, after calling her lawyer and arranging a locksmith, Helen drove into Midtown Phoenix to visit a small yoga studio run by her friend, Mariah. The studio smelled like eucalyptus and sage, soft flute music drifting through the air. Mariah, a silver-haired woman with warm brown eyes and a voice like velvet, enveloped Helen in a hug. I heard about everything, she murmured. Are you all right? Helen nodded, though her voice wavered. Better today. Mariah stepped back, hands on Helen's shoulders. You look stronger. Helen smiled faintly. I feel awake, I think. Good. Awakening always comes after a battle. Sometimes it comes because of one. They spent the next hour sitting on cushions near the front window as Helen recounted the past month. The eviction, the water bills, the drone investigation, the betrayal, the raid. Mariah listened without interruption, her expression calm but deeply attentive. When Helen finished, Mariah exhaled softly. You survived something profoundly violating, but you took your power back. That matters. Helen swallowed hard, touched by the sincerity. Then she revealed her idea. I want to convert the pool house into a yoga and meditation studio, Helen said slowly. Not for business, at least not yet. Mostly for me. Maybe eventually for small classes. A place of peace instead of whatever it became. Mariah's eyes lit up. Oh, Helen. Yes, that's exactly right. Spaces hold energy. Transforming that space will transform you. Helen felt warmth bloom in her chest. You think I can do it? Mariah smiled knowingly. You already started. And Helen realized she was right. The moment she imagined something new for the pool house, she had begun reclaiming it. 2 days later, after giving her statement to the police and handing over her surveillance files, Helen met with her attorney, Mr. Albright, a gray-suited man with a meticulous mustache and a calm, steady way of speaking. He reviewed the PI's involvement, the attempt to contest the will, and the text messages Helen had captured. We'll file a cease and desist against Rogan immediately, he said, tapping his pen against his legal pad. In addition, we can legally bar Jenna and Kyle from coming within 300 feet of your property. Helen hesitated. I don't want to ruin Jenna's life. Mr. Albright removed his glasses and looked at her carefully. Helen, she wasn't just unkind. She conspired to strip you of your legal rights. That's elder financial abuse. The words landed heavy in her stomach. Elder financial abuse. She'd heard the term before, on pamphlets at the community center, on commercials during daytime TV. But she'd never imagined being someone who needed to worry about it. But she was. She was a 65-year-old woman who had been targeted. Not by strangers, but by family. Her throat tightened. Mr. Albright touched her hand gently. You survived this because you were perceptive and proactive. Not everyone in your situation recognizes the danger. What you did wasn't vengeance. It was protection. Helen nodded slowly. The truth wasn't easy, but it was necessary. File the order, she said quietly. And whatever you need to do to protect my estate going forward, do it. Of course. The transformation of the pool house took time. First, a professional cleaning crew arrived, 3 women who walked in with masks, gloves, and industrial-level disinfecting equipment. They didn't ask questions, and Helen didn't volunteer answers. Then came painters who coated the interior walls in warm sandstone and pale desert rose, colors reminiscent of the Sedona cliffs she'd once pretended to visit. Next, a flooring specialist installed maple laminate. A carpenter repaired the broken door frame. A handyman removed what felt like 100 feet of mismatched extension cords left behind by Kyle. Piece by piece, the pool house shed its past. Piece by piece, it became hers again. Finally, after 6 long weeks, Helen stepped inside the finished space. Soft white curtains framed the windows. A woven jute rug covered the center of the floor. A small speaker played gentle Native American flute music. A mini fridge hummed quietly in the corner, stocked with herbal teas. On the far wall hung a single framed print. Peace begins where fear ends. Helen stepped onto the rug and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, her lungs felt full. And for the first time in years, she felt grounded. She unrolled her yoga mat, knelt down, pressed her palms together, closed her eyes. The desert was silent. The pool water glimmered. Her home was safe. And she finally was safe inside it. 3 months after the raid, Helen stood before a small audience at the local community center. The room was filled with retirees, caregivers, social workers, and a few curious younger adults. She had been invited to speak during Elder Financial Abuse Awareness Month. At first, she had hesitated. Public speaking hadn't been part of her life since her teaching days. But then she remembered how lost she had felt in the early days of suspicion. How isolated. How unsure. Maybe her story would help someone. So she agreed. And now, standing at the podium in a soft blue blouse, her silver hair neatly pinned back, Helen felt no fear. Only clarity. She began with honesty. I never imagined something like this could happen to me, she said, voice steady. We think danger comes from outside. But sometimes it comes from people we love. Helen stepped back from the community center podium, her palms still warm with the energy of the room's applause. Though her voice had softened near the end, the tremor in it had not been fear. It had been release. A release she had not known she needed until she stood before strangers and recited her own truth as though reading aloud from a book she had only recently learned how to write. But the chapter wasn't finished, not yet. And what happened after her speech would come to define not only her recovery, but her purpose. 2 weeks had passed since the rave bust, though Helen often caught herself measuring time differently now. Not in days or hours, but in distance. Distance from the pain, distance from the betrayal, distance from who she had been before the night her world cracked open. Her pool house, once the epicenter of deceit, noise and risk, had transformed into a skeleton of quiet possibility. Kyle and Jenna were gone, evicted without ceremony. Their belongings had been boxed and delivered to their motel by a third-party service Helen hired precisely to avoid confrontation. She had walked into the empty pool house afterward, breathing in the stale mix of beer, sweat, and smoke that clung to the walls. Empty Red Bull cans, scuffed flooring, deep scratches on the baseboards, stickers plastered to the kitchenette cabinets, faint neon paint splatters. But instead of grief, she felt clarity. She opened every window, every door. A desert breeze rolled through like a blessing. "This will be something beautiful again," she whispered. And she meant it. Over the next days, Helen hired a cleaning crew, a painter, an electrician, and a contractor. Not to restore the space to what it had been, but to create something entirely new. A yoga studio. Her own sanctuary. A soft-lit room with pale wood flooring, sage green mats, essential oil diffusers, woven tapestries, and a wall-length mirror that reflected the tranquil desert sky. It wasn't just about exercise. It was about reclaiming space, reclaiming peace, reclaiming herself. When the renovations were complete, Helen stood barefoot in the center of the room, arms open, breathing deeply. The air smelled of lavender and eucalyptus. The walls were smooth and unscarred. She felt for the first time in years completely at home. The morning after her speech, Helen was watering the succulents lining her back wall when she heard a soft knock on her gate. She wiped her hands on her shorts and walked over. Standing there were two people she did not expect. Tyler and Marjorie. Tyler held 2 iced coffees and a soft smile. Marjorie wore oversized sunglasses and looked one breeze away from being offended by the heat. "We come bearing hydration," Tyler said. "And moral support," Marjorie added. Helen let out a small laugh. "Well, come in before I melt." They settled on the patio, the shade casting neat stripes along the concrete. Tyler handed her a coffee. "We just wanted to say your speech was incredible," he said. "Truly," Marjorie chimed in. "You had that room wrapped around your little finger, Helen." You could have told them the sky was plaid and they would have nodded thoughtfully. Helen chuckled, shaking her head. "I was terrified." "I couldn't tell," Tyler said sincerely. "You did something most people can't. You told the truth. And you didn't hide the messy parts." Helen sipped her drink, letting the cool sweetness settle her nerves. "I didn't want to hide them," she said. "The more we keep quiet, the more this kind of thing keeps happening." Marjorie reached over and squeezed Helen's wrist. "You've always been strong, but now you're amplified." Helen blinked. "Amplified. Amplified," Marjorie repeated. "Like someone turned up the volume on the part of you that always knew exactly who you were." Tyler nodded. "It's true. You're different now." Helen looked out over the pool, the newly remodeled pool house glowing in the sun. "Maybe I am," she said quietly. That evening, Helen found an envelope wedged between her front door and welcome mat. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't from Kyle. It wasn't from Jenna. It was from the Maricopa County District Attorney's office. She opened it with steady hands. Inside was a printed letter thanking her for her assistance in the raid, confirming that charges were officially filed against multiple individuals, including Kyle, Rogan, and 3 event organizers whose names she didn't recognize. But Jenna's name was missing. Helen read the letter twice. Then a third time. She sat down on her couch, the air suddenly too still. After a long moment, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her call log until she found the number for Detective Alvarez. She pressed call. "Miss Marston," Alvarez answered warmly. "I was expecting to hear from you. Why isn't Jenna being charged?" Helen asked, her voice firm. There was a sigh on the other end. "She's cooperating," the detective said. "She gave testimony, handed over communications, names." Helen felt her chest tighten. "She betrayed me," she whispered. "And she walked away?" "No," the detective said gently. "She didn't walk away. But she isn't facing charges for the rave. As for the attempt to contest your will, that's civil, not criminal. And nothing was filed yet." Helen closed her eyes. "So she gets a clean slate?" "No," Alvarez corrected. "She gets a long road. And you get your life back." Helen thanked her and hung up. She sat in silence for a long time. Jenna wasn't going to jail. But maybe that was its own kind of punishment. 2 days later, Helen unlocked the new sliding glass door of her yoga studio and stepped into the fresh morning light. Her mat lay unrolled in the center of the room. A small ring light stood by the mirror, positioned exactly where Tyler had placed it. Today she would film the message the community center had asked for. Not a speech. Not a warning. A conversation. A message for anyone who felt too old, too tired, too ashamed, or too afraid to speak out. Helen pressed the camera button. The red light blinked on. She took a breath. "Hello," she began softly. "My name is Helen Marston, and I want to tell you something that took me 65 years to learn." Her voice felt calmer than she expected. Warm. True. That trusting others is a beautiful thing. But trusting yourself is essential. She talked about the warning signs, financial changes, emotional manipulation, secrecy. She talked about how love sometimes blinds us to red flags. How kindness can be weaponized. How fear can silence even the strongest voices. She talked about betrayal, and survival, and rebuilding. She talked about hope. When she finished, she clicked off the camera. Then she sat down on her mat, letting the quiet settle around her. For once, the quiet didn't hurt. It was late afternoon when Helen received the message. A text. From a number she hadn't saved, but recognized immediately. "Jenna, I saw the video. I'm glad you're okay." Helen stared at the screen, then put the phone down. Some wounds didn't need responding to. Some distances were better left unclosed. She stepped outside, the desert breeze warm against her skin. Her pool sparkled. Her studio waited. Her future, no longer overshadowed by fear or manipulation, felt wide, open, and uncluttered. Helen inhaled deeply and smiled. The story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about reclamation, and she had reclaimed everything. Helen woke before dawn the next morning, the soft blue of early light spilling across her bedroom walls like watercolor. For the first time in months, she didn't wake with her jaw clenched or her mind racing. She lay there quietly, listening to the gentle hum of her aging ceiling fan, letting the calm settle into her bones. Today was the day of her community center seminar, the talk she had agreed to give after months of urging from the director. The idea had made her nervous at first. Speaking publicly wasn't something she had a long history with. But after the events of the past weeks, Helen found herself needing to share what she had learned. Not for attention, not for vindication, but because she couldn't stand the thought of another person, another parent, another elder, feeling as blindsided and betrayed as she had. She rose from bed, stretched, and began her morning routine. The desert sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon when she stepped into the kitchen to make breakfast. She brewed her coffee, sliced a grapefruit, and toasted a piece of whole wheat bread. Simple. Soothing. Her phone buzzed as she sat down. A text from Lillian. Helen stared at the screen for several seconds before opening it. "Lillian. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to write back. I'm sorry." Helen exhaled long and slow. Not out of anger, out of recognition. Apologies, she realized, were more complicated than the words themselves. They came with pain, with history, with the weight of everything unspoken. She typed a reply. "Helen. Thank you for saying that. I hope you find a better path forward." She paused, considered, then added, "Helen. Take care of yourself." She sent it. And when she did, something unknotted inside her. Not forgiveness, not fully, but closure in its first gentle form. The community center was housed in a renovated elementary school on the north side of Phoenix, a squat adobe building with desert landscaping and murals painted by local artists. Helen pulled into the parking lot 15 minutes early, gripping her note cards with both hands. Inside, a small room had been set up with folding chairs, a lectern, and a projector. About a dozen people were already seated, mostly older adults, along with a few middle-aged sons and daughters who looked nervously devoted. The director greeted her warmly. "Thank you for doing this, Helen. We really appreciate it." "So do I," Helen said honestly. She stepped up to the lectern. The room quieted. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "My name is Helen Brooks. And a few months ago I thought I was doing something simple, something kind. I offered my stepdaughter and her husband a temporary place to stay after they were evicted. I had no idea I was opening the door to something much bigger, much more dangerous. She spoke slowly, deliberately, not to dramatize, but to make sure her words landed with clarity. I noticed little things at first. A higher water bill. Strange cars in my driveway at 2 in the morning. Excuses that didn't quite make sense. And like many of us, I wanted to believe the best. I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt. Heads nodded throughout the room. But when I finally looked closer, she continued, I uncovered something I never imagined. That my property was being used for illegal activity, and that I myself was being targeted, financially. Helen took a breath. I learned that love does not make us immune to manipulation, and trust, without boundaries, can become a doorway for exploitation. A man in the second row wiped his eyes discreetly. Helen offered him a soft, encouraging smile. So I'm here today, she went on. Not as someone who wants sympathy, but as someone who wants to remind you. You are not paranoid if something feels wrong. You are not overreacting if your instincts warn you. And you are not alone if someone you love tries to misuse your generosity. She clicked her remote, bringing up a slide titled, Warning Signs of Elder Financial Abuse. Document everything, she advised. Talk to your bank, your lawyer, your neighbors. Use your community resources. And most importantly, listen to yourself. The talk lasted about 40 minutes. When she finished, the room filled with soft applause. Not loud but honest. Several attendees lined up to thank her personally. You gave me courage, one woman said. My son's been acting strange about my accounts, whispered another voice, trembling. I'm going to look into it now. Helen felt warmth spread through her chest. Her pain transformed into someone else's strength. That, she realized, was its own form of healing. Later that afternoon, she returned home to a backyard bathed in warm golden sunlight. The pool house, once a site of chaos, now stood freshly painted, its windows cleaned, its small porch decorated with desert succulents and wind chimes. Inside was her new sanctuary, her yoga studio. Where there had once been strobe lights and spilled drinks, there were now mats, bolsters, calming tapestries, and a lightly diffused scent of lavender and cedar. Helen stepped inside, letting the quiet wrap around her like a soft shawl. She walked to the center of the room and lowered herself onto a mat. Closing her eyes, she inhaled slowly, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Then she exhaled. Long, controlled, intentional. She practiced for nearly an hour, moving through slow, restorative poses until the tension in her shoulders and spine finally melted away. On her last exhale, she felt something shift. Not just physically but emotionally. Her life wasn't the same, but she wasn't the same either. She was steadier now, sharper, more rooted in her own resilience than she had been in years. As she rolled up her mat, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from her neighbor, Mr. Lewis, the retired birdwatcher whose drone had helped her uncover everything. Amar. Lewis checking in. Everything good on your end? Helen smiled. Helen, better than good. Thank you again for everything. Amar. Lewis, anytime. And if you ever want drone lessons, I'm your guy. Helen chuckled, pocketing her phone. She stepped outside onto the porch, looking across her yard. The setting sun lit the sky in shades of coral and dusty purple, reflecting softly on the pool's surface. A breeze rustled the lemon tree near the fence, and for the first time in a long while this place, her home, felt entirely hers again. That evening she brewed a cup of chamomile tea and settled into her favorite patio chair. The night air was cool, touched with the faint scent of desert sage. She pulled a blanket over her lap and gazed out at the peaceful landscape. In her lap sat a clean blank notebook. She opened to the first page and wrote, New boundaries, new life, new strength. She paused, then added, and none of it will be taken from me again. She closed the notebook, set it aside, and leaned back. A soft smile curved across her face. This was closure. This was healing. This was the beginning of everything she had once feared she had lost. And as the stars emerged over Phoenix, bright, steady, unshaken, so did she. Thank you for watching. Helen's story is more than a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that trust, generosity, and family ties can be tested in ways we never expect. If you found this story gripping, informative, or eye-opening, Make sure to like the video and subscribe for more real-life stories that uncover the truths hiding in plain sight. And remember, stay aware, stay safe, and trust your instincts. Until next time.